I'm on pins and needles, and so should you be, waiting for the United States Supreme Court this week to rule on whether we are a nation of laws and whether we are a constitutional republic that protects human rights and the value of humans and gives them due process when they've been charged with something. Yes or no? The final brief is in from the American Civil Liberties Union to support Judge Jeb Boasberg's injunction, temporary injunction, to block Donald Trump's phony use of war powers in order to kidnap, deport, and send to the deep, dark recesses of a killer jail in El Salvador people without due process. Yes or no? Judge Boasberg says, let me get a handle on all of this. I don't think you properly use the Alien Enemies Act because I don't see a predatory incursion, invasion, war. These are not really enemy combatants. These are migrants. These are immigration issues. You have an immigration court for that. But let me get to the bottom of it. That wasn't good enough for Donald Trump. So he took an appeal to the Court of Appeals for D.C. And 2-1, I reported on this a week ago, Judge Henderson and Millett said, no. First of all, we're not sure this is even reviewable because it's a temporary restraining order. And if it was reviewable, you didn't properly invoke the Alien Enemies Act. Block continues. What happens next at the United States Supreme Court? Join me here on Legal AF. Let's get to the bottom of it. And I'm Michael Popok. Okay. That's where we're at. Trump didn't like the 2-1 decision, took an emergency application to the United States Supreme Court last week on March 28th. On March 28th, he said, "Oh, you got to let me continue to use the war power. It's not reviewable." That's a scary proposition. He's saying the federal courts can't review the exercise of war power by the president. Boom, because he's the commander-in-chief. I get you're the commander-in-chief. I get you have core constitutional functions that can't be the subject of an indictment for crimes. That's what the United States Supreme Court says. But that doesn't mean you get to take the federal courts out in the back and shoot them and say they don't have a role in our co-equal branches of government for checks and balance. I query this to the Trump administration. How do you check and balance the president during wartime? You can't. Even a declaration of martial law is reviewable by a federal court. And it starts with a 1 federal judge, up to a 3-judge panel at the Court of Appeals, up to the United States Supreme Court, and it's 9. That's how it's worked for 200 years. So his first scary proposition when he took the application, Trump, to the Supreme Court was, you can't review me. You can't stop me. Catch me if you can. Great. Two out of all 3 judges actually said, no, that's our job to review the actions of a president, even during wartime. Even Roosevelt during wartime, even Lincoln during wartime could have had his cases reviewed by a federal court. That's 1. 2, he said, I declared a war. Well, you don't declare a war. Congress declares a war. You can proclaim that there is an enemy incursion or invasion, and while Congress gets their act together and gets around to declaring a war against Venezuela, apparently, you can do some stuff around that, but there still has to be that fundamental trigger of a predatory invasion, incursion, enemy combatants, and the like. And as Judge Henderson said, and it's repeated in the brief by the American Civil Liberties Union, migration is not an enemy incursion, is not a predatory incursion, is not a war. First of all, the record shows that Tren de Aragua from the Aragua state in Venezuela isn't even that well organized. Sure, some of them have tattoos, a lot of them don't. They're not a coordinated enemy combatant working for the Venezuelan government, at all. And that's something to be proven before a judge. Very hard to prove when Trump is sending them so far into a deep hole that even he can't get them out. Let me repeat that. He's sending them so far into a deep hole that the Trump administration has just admitted that they deported somebody who was under an asylum application with an order of an immigration judge not to be removed from the country, that he got on that plane, he was kidnapped and put on that plane. And they admitted this guy from Maryland should not have been sent. It was an administrative snafu. It was an administrative error. It was another glitch. Yeah, except they can't get him back. They said, well, that may be true, but we can't get him back either. We don't know how to get him back. He's there. I thought you told federal courts that you had agreements, foreign relation agreements and contracts negotiated between Marco Rubio and Bukele in the president of El Salvador, and Kristi Noem said the same thing. So you're telling the courts that's a lie? That Marco Rubio can't pick up the phone right now and tell Bukele to go find prisoner number 18739 he was signed for like an Amazon package and go pull him out of that prison? That's even worse. That actually undermines the Trump administration's position before the United States Supreme Court, because they have admitted that all of these people have the right to face their accuser, to have a due process, to prove whether they are or are not enemy combatants. And yet they say, but we can't get them back. Well, then you've purposely placed them beyond the reach of the court. That's not the court's problem. That's your problem. Go get them back. I mean, that could be the order. Now, the Supreme Court is looking at a very narrow issue, but with broader implications. The very narrow issue is, like, for the next week, will they support Boasberg's injunction to stop the use of the Alien Enemies Act to deport people without due process? Thumbs up or thumbs down. But it's bigger than that. Because if they block Boasberg and they reinvigorate this program that Trump is using, you think he's power hungry and power mad now and drunk with power? Wait till you see what happens if he wins this United States Supreme Court decision. And what does it say about the 5 or 6 people that are going to support Donald Trump on this? My personal opinion, Trump's going to lose on this application. Could be 5-4, could be 6-3, could be even greater, but he's going to lose. Let me read to you from the actual briefing so you know how this issue is framed for the court to decide. And it's all about whether the Alien Enemies Act was properly exercised or not, whether we're at war or not, and ultimately whether it should be stayed for like this next week until we have a ruling by the lower court judge. See, Supreme Courts and appellate courts like to have lower court judges make their rulings. Okay. Here's what the ACLU said on page 1. The government has not satisfied its exceedingly high burden to warrant the extraordinary relief it seeks, vacating unappealable temporary restraining orders. The TRO does not order anyone's release, nor does it prevent the government from carrying out regular removals under the Immigration and Nationality Act. But the plaintiffs will suffer extraordinary and irreparable harms, being sent out of the United States to a notorious Salvadoran prison where they will remain incommunicado, potentially for the rest of their lives without having had any opportunity to contest their designation as gang members. A designation as gang members that the Trump administration has already admitted that they have the right to contest. From who? From how? From where? Trump administration, if they're heard correctly, they're like, we'll do it by a writ of habeas corpus. Oh, that's a very old-timey white powdered wig and quill pen moment. A writ of habeas corpus. Oh, you say a writ of habeas corpus, man. You know what you need to have a writ of habeas corpus? You need to have the corpus. You need to have the body. But the body's in El Salvador. So how are you going to bring it before a federal judge in America, even Puerto Rico, which people don't think's America? How are you going to bring it before a federal judge in America if the body's not here? So they have undermined and completely vitiated the right of habeas corpus. So you can't point to it and go, use the writ. They should have done it in Texas before they got shackled and put on the planes. Not happening. Let me turn to page 24 in your hymnal of your briefing and listen to this over to page 25 also. Make sure I got my pages right here. Sorry about that. The Alien Enemies Act has only ever been invoked in times of declared war. Defendants now seek to invoke this limited wartime authority to execute summary removals wholly untethered to any actual or imminent war or to the specific conditions placed in the statute. They then go through what is an invasion, what is a predatory incursion, and the language that was used around there. And they also declare in their brief that this is reviewable. That the Ludecky case from 1953 says federal judges have a role in declaring whether this is right or wrong as an exercise of presidential power. It is likely, based on the record, that these people will never see the light of day. They'll never get to see a lawyer. They'll never get to see their families. They'll never be able to prove their case, and they will likely die soon in that El Salvadoran prison. Over 300 people have died in the last 2 years in that prison, in those prisons, and allegedly, according to the state, to the government, of natural causes. If you think beating to death and then placing the bodies dead, rotting in jail cells next to live people, right? If you think that's natural causes, I got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. I'm going to continue to follow it all. Next stop on the train. And I think it is telling, though, that Chief Justice Roberts had the ability to issue what's called an administrative stay to block Boasberg and ultimately the circuit court and stop the injunction, allow Donald Trump during the next week or two to use the Alien Enemies Act and send people to El Salvador. He did not do that. Now, you'll often hear that administrative stays are not really on the merits and don't take anything of it, and I haven't made my decision yet, but he also didn't issue the stay, if you know what I mean. So my prediction is Amy Coney Barrett's not going to go with this. Chief Justice Roberts not going to go with this continued kidnapping and deportation. There's probably 3 or 4 votes to support it, but I think ultimately Roberts and Barrett slide over with Sotomayor, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and Kagan and vote as a block and maybe drag Gorsuch over, maybe on this particular issue. Although he's really weird and a little bit hinky when it comes to presidential power, Gorsuch, but I think they may be able to get him to slide over. It could go up as high as 7-2. So it's going to go between 5-4 and 7-2, my prediction, in favor of Boasberg, keeping the injunction in place while he goes through this preliminary injunction briefing and hearing on the 8th of April. And then it goes back through the appellate court and maybe ends up back with the Supreme Court during their summer break in another month or two, but not now. I'll continue to follow it. You're here on Legal AF. Hit the free subscribe button. I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.